Good evening. This is Wallingford Lee from the International Grapevine on a second recap of 2020. Why a recap of 2020? So many things that took place. So many things have happened in 2020 that affected our life in many ways. One of the things that will affected our life a lot was the coronavirus. This thing took us by surprise. It came in, we would say about March 2020. But in reality, our president knew about it in January 2020, based on what the New York Times says and based on what the other newspapers said. How true it is, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that he is the leader of the country. At the beginning, I think, like me or anybody else, I don't think he thought it was that serious. This thing came from Wuhan, Japan, and it went all over the world. It affected England, North America, South America, Central America. But it kind of hit us here in the United States a little bit more hard, very unpredictable disease that came out of nowhere. And we tried to deal with it, and it was not easy. To date, it has killed over 410,000 people here in the United States, which is a horrible number. Horrible number. It hit New York, which I consider probably capital of the world, the hardest. Luckily for New York, they had a great governor who did not care about anything except saving lives. He closed down a couple of times and because he had to do it. And in the long run, he was able to turn around New York. We were able to learn that our city epicenter was the first wave where it hit, which was New York City. We learned that we would try to educate our children from home because we had to close school because of how it affected everybody. We learned how difficult this horrible disease was. And of course, on the grapevine, we tackled it. We were lucky enough to have a great doctor on board. We're talking about Dr. Mario St. Laurent, who was kind enough to come on our program and talk about the pros and the difficult and the danger of this horrible disease and the expectation, how to go about it, how to stay safe, how it was important to wear a mask, how important it was to keep a distance where we went place. So as you sit back and look at this portion of the grapevine, you'll understand that we tackle almost everything. So in this few minutes, you'll have an opportunity to see how we looked at the coronavirus. Good evening. Welcome to a special edition of the International Grapevine. This is your host, Wallingford Lee. Tonight on the International Grapevine, we're going to talk about the coronavirus. This is the second show we were doing about the coronavirus, so this one is going to be Coronavirus Part 2. We want to talk a little bit about it because we want to find out what's going on, why it's affecting everywhere in the world, especially here in the United States of America. Matter of fact, we have over 5 million people with coronavirus, and we have lost over 177,000 people. And I'm quite sure if we don't find a solution quick to it, the numbers are going to go up. It's amazing. It attacked New York in such a fast way. Luckily for us, we had a great governor that put things in place, and it really killed a lot of people in New York for a while. While New York has come under control because they've set all kind of rules and regulations, now it's affecting Florida and California in a tremendous way. I mean, awful way, just knocking out people left and right. We're pleased today to have as a special guest, Dr. Mario St. Laurent, who has been kind enough to be on our program to discuss a little bit about the coronavirus and the danger of it and what have you. This gentleman came with an outstanding background where he has practiced in the medical field for a long time, since I would say since 1989. He has practiced in Corona, in Jackson Heights, Matter of fact, I think he has a business right now in Queens, to be honest with you. So it gives us a great satisfaction to have him on our program to bring out to light the pros and cons of this virus. Welcome to our program, Doctor.
Thank you, Mr. Lee. It's a pleasure to be here to put some enlightenment in what's puzzling a lot of people. Okay, what get a lot of people confused, from the top politician to the lowest in our society, and it's a real tragedy. But we're gonna get the hang of it. We will get the hang of it.
I hope so, because it has done a lot of damage in Europe, South America, Central America, all over the globe. And I think some people claim that it came from China. Some people claim that it came from Europe. And right now, my understanding is that at least China seemed to have a little bit of control on it. But anyway, more importantly, what exactly is the coronavirus and what usually caused that?
Well, coronavirus was identified back in 1965 by the scientists. Back then, it had caused mild flu-like symptoms, and it really was not a big deal until back in 2002, where they had a serious coronavirus, which was the SARS, that was in South China, which was called severe acute respiratory syndrome. Okay, that killed back then. It propagated into 28 countries, and it killed like 776 people. But it was contained. And then in 2013, we had the MERS virus, which is the Middle East respiratory syndrome. Okay, that killed 886 people. Coronavirus has been, like I said, since 1965, but this virus that came in early November in Wuhan is a mutation of the SARS virus. Okay, it is a severe acute respiratory virus, but this virus is so slick and so hard to figure out. I think there was a mutation that was done. I think this was a mistake, that this virus really escaped from the lab by error. I don't think it was something that was done deliberately. That's my personal opinion. So
I'm still amazed at the fact that it's around since 65. But when it came out in 1965, did it hurt people as much as it has right now? It didn't spread that much like it has spread now?
No, because back then it was just like it was manifesting just like the flu, just like we have, the flu. But it seems like after decade, the coronavirus is getting more complicated and is causing more severe problems. We have to keep in mind that of all the coronavirus we only have 7 that has been identified in the human human species.
Okay.
That causes a problem. Of course, the first wave of SARS had identified in bats and also in some meat in cows, and cattle. But this one, they tried to correlate it with the same first SARS virus they had, but there are still doubts because people believe that this thing really escaped from the lab.
When you say escape from the lab, what you mean, that not intentionally, you're just like an accident or something like that?
Yes, I believe this was an accident, and then it went out of control.
How has it spread so fast? What's caused the spread in this virus?
The virus is contrary to the other virus. Okay, it spread from from um, contact droplets from people to people, right, through the air, and then it stays in the air for a while. Um, from what we have seen, it can stay on the surface for over 3 weeks.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
If you remember that boat that they had quarantined everybody from that boat, they find the virus that was deposited on materials in the boat after 3 weeks. So this is something that's very new to science, and it caught the scientists by surprise. And they're still trying to figure out, how this virus is affecting people so hard and so in such a complex way.
So it's fair to say that you can get it by contact then, from contact from people to people or stuff like that, or a sneeze, a cough or something like that.
Yes, but it doesn't go through your skin. It has to be droplets from sneezing, from coughing, from it can sustain in the air for maybe 8 to 12 hours. So, and then it depends also the viral load you get. It depends on where you are. If you catch it in the street, okay, the viral load might be less than if you catch it in a cab or in an elevator, in a place that it's enclosed. So the viral
It's more
load
dangerous enclosed, I would imagine.
right. The viral load you get, it depends on how it's going to manifest in your system. All right. So the stronger the load, okay, the more severe it's going to manifest. The less concentrated it is, if you're outdoor, the less likely it's going to manifest on you. Mm-hmm.
What are some of the symptoms or the early symptoms of this coronavirus? Because it's such a mixed bag. You heard for a while that people are in ventilators and they're this and they're that. Some people get into the hospital, they don't come out. So, for our viewers and audience, what are some of the beginning symptoms and some of the manifested symptoms out there?
Yeah. Well, it varies. It varies, and it's a multitude of symptoms. We're going to go through the most common, okay? Most common, people start with a fever, okay? With body ache. A lot of people start with cough, a dry cough, looking like bronchitis. And some people present with just diarrhea and headaches. And it depends on your ability or your physical how would I say that?
Condition?
If you have comorbidity or not. If you're in good health, it's easier for you to fight. Your immune system is strong and stable. It's easier for you to fight it. But when you have comorbidities, meaning that if you have diabetes or high blood pressure, or if you have any chronic disease, kidney disease, sickle cell, or if you're on chemotherapy, then your immune system is weakened. Then it can really take you down easily. So it's best, like they said, if this thing is while this thing is around, it's best to do everything possible to boost up your immune system, so that when this thing get on you, okay, it doesn't take you down as fast.
So your immune system has to be solid, in other words, to fight it a little bit. Because one of the things that we understand is that it usually attack a lot of people who are diabetic or elderly people above 50s and 60s. Sometimes we hear that it mostly affects Latinos and people of color. So we got a kind of mixed feeling. Is that correct? Does it attack only minorities? I mean, it attacks everyone, but most minorities?
No, what happened is after this virus hit us back in March, April, a lot of people are started looking at why such a large difference between people with pigmentation or people without pigmentation. And that's how we find out a lot about the importance of vitamin D in preventing this disease, because people with fair skin absorb ultraviolet light easily. And with that, it activates their vitamin D. The active vitamin D um, um, easily in the system. And the role of vitamin D in your kidney, in your pancreas, and in your lungs is very important, because vitamin D, what it does is that there's that angiotensin you have in your kidney that regulates your blood pressure. If you don't have receptors to block this angiotensin, your blood pressure is going to go sky high.
When you
This
say
is why.
receptors, just more or less, when we'll talk about receptors.
Okay, receptors are it's like
Defense?
an absorber. No, it's what's absorbed the vitamin to make
Okay.
it work in your system. It receives. So that's what you call receptor. It receives the vitamins easily to activate, your immune system. And also we also have that in pancreas. So this is why these diseases are more prominent in Black than in Caucasian, because of the way we absorb, we utilize vitamin D in our system. So, in March and April, and then all these studies started coming out. And then what they used to recommend for number of vitamin D in Black as and white people is totally different, because people with fair skin absorb ultraviolet light and they activate it easily, while dark skinned people do not absorb ultraviolet light as
Okay.
well to activate the vitamin D. So in winter we hibernate, we put a lot of clothes on, we don't get sunlight, okay, and we don't take vitamin D supplement. So we find out that in order for, if you are dark skinned, you got to take at least 10,000 units a day, or 60,000
Wow.
units a week, okay? And we used to say 4,000 is good for you. And then we find out 4,000 is not for Black people, okay? It more or less for white people, because you don't absorb it as well. This is a very, very important data that came out in March after people started dying.
I guess after people started dying and they did all their research and stuff like that, and they went deep, that's how come they came up with that philosophy about it.
Yeah, they had to look for why so many, what the proportion, why it's so disproportionate, the number of Hispanic and Black that are dying as compared to white patients. So
Very interesting indeed. Very interesting. As we continue talking about the danger of coronavirus, we'll be right back on International Grapevine, talking about the danger of this. And we are kind enough to have on board a doctor that has the background and the experience that can guide us in the right direction. We'll be right back on the Grapevine. All right, we're back here on International Grapevine. Again, this is Wallingford Lee. We hope that you have enjoyed the first 15 minutes where we talked a little bit about the dangers of the coronavirus. And this second part of the recap of 2020, we want to talk to the president of Costa Rica. We're talking about the ex-president or former president of Costa Rica, Luis Guillermo Solis, who was the president from 2014 all the way to 2016. I want to talk to him. We'll talk to him about some of his accomplishments, some of the things that he faced going in as a president. Costa Rica have only had most of the time two political parties, Liberación Nacional y Calderón Guardia. But he came in through the PAC. PAC was a new political division that was made in Costa Rica, and he came in as president. He served 4 years. After 4 years, he was forced to come out. We talked a little bit about his accomplishment. We talk about Costa Rica is one of the most peaceful countries in the world, very educated Latin country, and the importance of all the new technologies and new division of companies coming in, like all kind of software company is in Costa Rica from the United States, all kind of American company, and now they've been penetrated by China. China worked something out with Costa Rica where they're building a certain amount of roads that will go from the capital down to the Caribbean or the Atlantic zone. We talked a little bit all about some new train and new buses that China have brought into Costa Rica. As I stated to Mr. Solis, what is their purpose? Whenever China penetrate a place, there's a mean and a logic why they do things. Then they don't do it for free. We talk about how fast Costa Rica have grown. Costa Rica has over 5.6 million people. Out of that, a great portion are Nicaraguans who have crossed the border because the problem that they have with their government, and the United States have asked Costa Rica to take some of these people from Nicaragua. What type of problem has it presented for Guillermo Solis as a president? So in this interview with him, you have the opportunity to hear him explain his side of it and a little bit about the infrastructure of Costa Rica and what can be done to fix infrastructure so it could be much better. Again, great country, great possibilities, a lot of good jobs and stuff like that. But even now, they're working with a large deficit in the government, which is a concern to the country and Central America. Costa Rica is probably one of the best situated country in Central America, and the only country in the world that doesn't have an army. Can they keep it up like that without an army? We don't know. Time will tell. So sit back and listen to Mr. Solis' explanation of some of the questions that we confront them with as we continue here on International Grapevine. ¿Te fuiste?
No, te dije que cierra ya el programa,
Okay,
que te suscriban.
okay.
5, 4.
All right, we came to a happy conclusion of the program of recap that we just did, where we talk about coronavirus and, of course, a little bit about politics, about Costa Rica with the former president of Costa Rica, Guillermo Solis. As we leave here, we want to leave you with the flavor of the things that we cover in 2020, which were extremely important. And at the same time, we want you to continue watching our program. We're on every week on YouTube and also on Facebook. Take the opportunity. Join us here so you can know who we are. And as you follow us on those two sites, you'll have the opportunity to write to us to tell us what you think about our program. Again, we want to thank you so much for being our audience and continue to watch us as we continue to navigate all over, bringing you the things that interest you. And again, this is Wallingford Lee saying good night for International Grapevine and hope that you've enjoyed our program. Luis Guillermo Solis Rivera was the 47th president of the Republic of Costa Rica from 2014 to 2018. He was inaugurated into the office on May 8, 2014. He is a member of the center-left Citizen Action Party, PAC. Solis led the field in the 2014 presidential election and won the presidency in a landslide election, winning more votes than any presidential candidate in the history of the nation. Solis has a long academic and political career, culminating in his election as the first president of Costa Rica to be a member of PAC. Good evening. Welcome to a special edition of the International Grapevine. This is your host, Wallingford Lee. Tonight on the International Grapevine, we're going to have the pleasure of having the former president of Costa Rica to talk a little bit about Costa Rica and about himself, of course. I'm talking about my special guest, Mr. Luis Guillermo Rivera. Mr. Guillermo Rivera Solis, I'm sorry. I just want to say that Costa Rica is one of the most educated country in Latin America, and it's a very quiet country, and one that a lot of tourists are beginning to find out about, and also a lot of investors. So we wanted to take this opportunity to work with the president for him to go back a little bit, not too far back when he was a president of Costa Rica, which was back in 2014 to 2018. And we want to talk about the advancement of Costa Rica and the pros and cons. So it gives us a great deal of pleasure and, of course, satisfaction to have him as our special guest tonight on the International Grapevine. It took us a while to get him, but let me tell you something. He's a good man, a solid man, and it's good to have him on board. Welcome to our show, President Solis.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lee. I'm very honored to be here tonight, and I thank you for the invitation. It's clearly a privilege for me, and I'm very happy to be able to address our viewers, about Costa Rica and what it has been able to accomplish through the decades.
Well, no question about it. Costa Rica is a very quiet country, and one of the things that a lot of people are surprised to know that they abolished their army back in 1948, and how can they live without an army and without a problem? What would be your response to someone like that every time they're surprised to find out that this nation, a small nation, that has kept their nose clean and they don't have an army, and they have abolished the army back in 1948?
Well, this happened it was a very transcendental decision that was made by Mr. Jose Figueres after winning our last civil war. He's the only general that has disbanded his victorious army in the history of the world. He decided that it was a good idea to put an end to the call of weapons and instead use the resources that are many required to keep an army and invest them in education, in health, in housing, in projects that would bring development to the country. So I think that this was the secret, not only to put an end to the army as a permanent institution, which of course in and of itself brought stability. We know in the Latin American and Caribbean experience what armies do to countries, but also allowed the resources that were going to be spent in the army to be invested otherwise in more human development projects. And I think that was a very good idea. Now, we didn't have a strong army to begin with before the army was abolished. This is to be said. But this whole notion of turning our security to the hands of a civilian police, a police force that's under civilian authority, and our international defense on international tribunals and multilateral international tribunals was not only unprecedented in the world, but it has become a brand of Costa Rica throughout the world.
Well, it goes without saying that Jose Figueres really had a tremendous vision at a time like that, where he could have taken power, and he was honest and upfront, and he had a tremendous amount of vision. I guess his motto was more education than soldiers, and it makes a whole lot of sense when you think about places like Venezuela, when you think about places like Nicaragua, the things that happened, the overthrow of government by the military people, and Costa Rica felt safe and still continue to be safe. Every 4 blocks you walk in Costa Rica many years ago, you would find a football field and a school, and it continued to be that way. And that's tremendous vision in this part, no question about it.
Well, one thing that you are mentioning, Mr. Lee, that I would like to underscore is the fact that we've had a very solid public education system since the 19th century. Next year, in September of 2021, Central America will celebrate its 200th anniversary of independence. Costa Rica inaugurated its first girls' school in 1839. 1839.
Wow.
That was only a few years after independence. And we kept that logic moving on until a big reform was undertaken in 1869, making primary education mandatory and paid by the state, which is public. And then we went on to 1973, where we took that reform to 9th grade being mandatory for all children in school. We have developed a university education. In other words, education, public education, we also have private schools, of course, cannot be improvised. It's like good wine. You cannot have a very good wine from one day to the other. You have to invest in it, take care of it, tender it, and then you have a very good result. And this is what explains why Costa Rica has become a selected place for investors that require talented human capital to work in their venues.
No question about it. I couldn't agree with you more. As we move down there, we'll talk a little bit. We wanted to find out, what was your experience and what was your feeling when you were named the 47th president of Costa Rica? Was you surprised, considering that you had left Liberación Nacional for a while and then you went into the PAC party? Did you felt that you had a great chance of winning? And when you won, how did you feel? What was your feeling?
I think everybody was surprised, even myself. I mean, I've been a teacher all my life. I have over 40 years experience as a university professor. I'm a professional historian and political scientist. So my experience in politics it was very, very limited. I joke frequently when they ask me this question, and I say that the only presidency and political position, the only election I had won before being elected president of Costa Rica was president of my high school. So I was a very unexpected president. And I think that meant that a lot of people were surprised. Obviously, it was the biggest honor that my country could have bestowed upon me. And I tried to be as faithful as I could to the mandate that the people of Costa Rica gave me. It was surprising because I was pretty sure that I was going to get into the second round. But I never thought I was going to win the first one, even slightly. I won by 1% the first round. And then in the second round, I got the largest voting in the history of the country.
That any president ever had.
300. Yeah, that's true. So, it was a beautiful moment. And I think we enjoyed the possibility of seeing the country break away from the bipartisanship of the past into a new situation, which has not been easy to handle, of course, because bipartisanship had ruled Costa Rica for 70 years. But the country is now a different place, and I'm glad to know that this is, in part, the result of my administration.
Well, we know for many years Costa Rica was a two-party country. It was either Liberación Nacional and the other party escaped my mind right now. But those were the two principal parties. So when the PAC party came aboard, I think a lot of people were surprised, but also they demonstrated what they were feeling. They wanted a change. And we understand that in the PAC party that you run against Epsi Campbell, Juan Mendoza, Ronald Solis to be the leader of the PAC in order to get the presidency. But I was surprised to find out that the country went away from a two-party system. I was really shocked about that. What do you think caused that?
Well, I think this has happened throughout the world. In a sense, in the United States, it happened with Obama in the Democratic Party. It happened with Trump in the Republican Party. They were also not outsiders because, Mr. Trump was obviously in business, but Mr. Obama had been in politics for a long while. But they did not belong to the establishment. They were not people who were supposed to be at the forefront of their parties. There was, and I think it continues to exist, some tiredness about traditional politics, of politics as usual. And this is what has explained, I think, throughout the world that you'll see, and I was one of the first, a rupturist president coming to power. People got tired of what they saw, and they wanted change. You said it well, and this happened in Costa Rica. Bipartisanship is a very good model when you have a very homogeneous society. But when society becomes diverse, or increasingly diverse, and not only in a professional or economic sense, but also in a sociological sense, then bipartisanship doesn't work. You need to form alliances, coalitions of social forces that are striving to get represented and are not necessarily represented in bipartisanship. And this is, I think, what allowed for my election and remains a very fundamental part of the new Costa Rican political situation, which is now, of course, undergoing a very complicated moment because of COVID and all the repercussions that has brought about.
When you took the presidency, as you look back now, what were the three biggest or four biggest challenges that was presented to you in your mind going forward? Now you won the presidency. Now you're the president of Costa Rica, 2014. What were the challenges that you think that you were facing that was the most important four or three challenges going in?
Well, one ongoing challenge, which I inherited and my predecessor inherited from her predecessor, and so,
Chinchilla.
yeah, was fiscal situation. We had not been able, and we were not able to do it, even when we improved it quite a bit, to get a fiscal reform going through, a tax reform, as they would call it in the United States. And that was a big hassle. I mean, Costa Rica's democracy, as any democracy, Mr. Lee, in the world, is expensive to maintain. I'm the son and the grandson of shoemakers, and I like to compare democracy with a good pair of shoes, in the sense that good shoes are always expensive shoes. Some shoes are very expensive and they're not good quality shoes. But if you combine quality and branding and etc., a pair of good shoes is always expensive. So happens with democracy. Democracy is always expensive. You can have very expensive democracies that are not good. Okay, you have to watch expenses and you have to watch corruption and other things. But if you want to have a good quality corruption, you have to pay for it. And the only two sources a country like Costa Rica has in order to do this is the economy, the general productivity of the country, and the taxation system. And our taxation system was very low, 13%, which obviously is lower than the average in Latin America, and we couldn't solve it. So that was one challenge. The second challenge was unemployment, which was at the time around 10%, with an informal employment that was around 30%. You know, that was half of what it is in other countries of Central America, but still too high. And we had to, in order to get the unemployment down, you have to support private business. There's no other way to do it. Government cannot pick up for that. So that was the second challenge. And I think that the third challenge had to do with getting the infrastructure moving again. There was a lot of money that we had received in loans that was not being used, and we put it to use, all of it. In fact, so much so that the Alvarado administration that succeeded mine is still using, the monies that we were able to bring forth that had been approved but were not being used in building new roads and updating the infrastructure of the country.
I think one of the biggest things that face Costa Rica, otherwise than things that you talk about and you just finished, the infrastructure of Costa Rica. I think that it needs somewhat of an upgrading as it is right now. I think it's a beautiful country. It has a lot to offer, but the infrastructure situation is something of a concern as you think about it, because these are roads that were built many years ago. Some of them has been upgraded and stuff like that, but they still need to be dealt with. There's a lot of things. We heard a rumor that China might be interested in being part of the players to build infrastructure of Costa Rica. How true is that? I don't know.
Oh no, they are already rebuilding one of the main highways to the Caribbean coast, to the city of Limon. This is a big project that was started under the Arias administration and that moved forward rather swiftly during my administration. We also have refurbished completely the port of Moín, also in the Caribbean, $1 billion investment by Merck's APM terminals. We are now almost finishing the expansion of the Inter-American Highway from Barranca, that near Punta Arenas,
yes,
all the way into Liberia, the capital of the province of Guanacaste in the north. I finished, number of bypasses. There's a triple bypass now that it's being built in the northern part of the city of San Jose. I think that you're right. Yes, we need more. We, for example, I invested a lot of money in aerodromes, in regional airports, which I found were necessary to stimulate tourism within Costa Rica, because sometimes it takes just too long to get to the southern part of the country, and the tourists do not have the time to do it. So we invested that heavily on it. But still, infrastructure, as you mentioned, is something that you have to be updating all the time. It grows with the country. You can see it in bigger countries. You get to Seoul, you get to Los Angeles, you get to Miami, you get to New York, and there's always something going on in the streets, in the highways. They're always building because there's need for bigger venue, for bigger infrastructure to take care of the public. So yes, we could do better in that field.
I'll answer you in this way. Obviously, when you're a president, the criticism and the pressure come from all different directions. And my feeling is, and I'm not a good politician, I'm a bit of a historian, an economic type of person. 4 years sometimes is not enough time for a person to finish all the project and processes that they see and they want to do. And I think if I remember the laws of Costa Rica, you're only allowed to serve one term out. That's 4 years, and then you have to come out. Having said that, I'm thrilled to find out that China is involved with the part of the building the roads to Limon. I think a little bit in some ways that Limon is the forgotten town a little bit because all the tourism seem to go to the Pacific. So what can be done in your estimation about building the Atlantic zone so that it can have the access, bringing tourism to the Atlantic zone like years ago when the Americans used to be in Limon?
Well, let me say that in terms of what you mentioned about re-election, it's interesting. You know, when I was in campaign, I vowed that I would only run once in my life, that I was never going to seek re-election. And I did so because I'm deeply concerned, and I'm convinced of this, Mr. Lee, that re-election-itis is a malady of Latin American politics. All Latin American politicians want to rule forever. You know, and this is something that I despise absolutely. So I said, listen, if you want to have me, you're going to have me 4 years, and that's going to be it. And in fact, I'm not going to run again if I lose this election. So I'm very much into that. Now, the Costa Rican law has changed, and now you can become reelected in a very cumbersome and very inconvenient way. You have to rule 4, have to go out 8, and then you can come back for another 4 terms, for another 4 years, which is a lousy system. You know, we should have the American system, 4 years and then another 4 years, because you're right, 4 years is not enough. It's too short. I mean, there are a number of projects that require more time. I don't know if it's 5 or 6, but, 8, I don't see that as too complicated. But at any rate, in my own case, I said no more, once, and that was it. Now, regarding Limon, you're absolutely right. Limon was and has always been a very rich province of Costa Rica. For our audience, Limon is the province that is to the Caribbean side. Some people talk about the Atlantic. No, it's not the Atlantic. It's the Caribbean. And it was originally populated by some of the most important indigenous peoples of the country. And then our Black population came to Limon from the islands to work in the banana plantations and the building of the railroad. My grandmother and my great-grandmother came to Costa Rica from Jamaica. So I am a very proud Afro-Costa Rican, although it doesn't show too much, especially here. But I consider myself an honorary Limonense because of that. You know, I'm very proud about my Antillean heritage. And so I put a lot of attention on Limon because I really think that the province has a tremendous potential. And in fact, all my concerns about the port and bringing in more investments through Limon has to do precisely for that reason. And in fact, let me tell you, I mean, Limon has one of the most fantastic environments for tourism. I love to go there because we don't have the big hotels and the noise that sometimes accompanies those huge developments in the Pacific side of the country. Costa Rica has 2 shores, one in the Caribbean, one in the Pacific. And you go to the southern part of the province, and then you have these beautiful, pristine beaches with white sand and corals, and we have our national parks there. So it's a magnificent province, and I think Limon is going to fly high once we have that new new highway completed.
I hope so. When we get back on International Grapevine here, talking with the former president of Costa Rica, talking about the things in Costa Rica, we're going to try to get into the energy. We want to try to get into some other issues that we continue talking to Luis Guillermo Solis about the progress of Costa Rica, the plus and the good things that Costa Rica has to offer. We'll be right back on International Grapevine as we continue to navigate forward. All right, we came to a happy conclusion of the program of recap that we just did, where we talk about coronavirus and, of course, a little bit about politics, about Costa Rica with the former president of Costa Rica, Guillermo Solis. As we leave here, we want to leave you with the flavor of the things that we cover in 2020, which were extremely important. And at the same time, we want you to continue watching our program. We're on every week on YouTube and also on Facebook. Take the opportunity. Join us here so you can know who we are. And as you follow us on those two sites, you'll have the opportunity to write to us to tell us what you think about our program. Again, we want to thank you so much for being our audience and continue to watch us as we continue to navigate all over, bringing you the things that interest you. And again, this is Wallingford Lee saying good night for International Grapevine and hope that you've enjoyed our program. Thank you.